Hi everyone, it's Fiona, an environmental educator with the Sandia Mountain Natural History Center and the New Mexico Museum of Natural History and Science. Today I'm doing something a little different. I'm doing a Q&A video with questions that were submitted by 5th graders from Sandia Vista Elementary in Rio Rancho, New Mexico. These students from Ms. Graham's class had their virtual field experience with me where we spent 2 hours going over the parts of the ecosystem, doing activities outside their homes, talking about their findings and observations, and looking at objects that I brought from the mountain ecosystem. Then afterwards, they submitted cards to me that included things they were still curious about and questions they still had after the program. So I'm going to go through some of these because maybe some of you have the same questions. All right, it's time for the fungus and lichen questions. Everybody's favorite, right? So one question I got was, where is the most common place to find fungus? Well, fungus can be found just about anywhere in most ecosystems, but it can be hard to spot. A lot of it is underground in these kind of spiderweb-like formations that are the mycelium or the hyphae of the fungus. And then fungus is also inside of things or tiny little dots on leaves or in logs and wood and things like that. So just know that even if you're not seeing fungus, it is all around. It's there, it's decomposing things, it's part of your ecosystem. But the best place to maybe find some fungus is to look for wetter spots and cooler or shadier spots. So a good way that I'll look for fungus is by kind of rolling or turning over branches and logs. A lot of times you'll find fungi growing underneath. You'll see little fuzzy molds and things like that. Or just looking on the trunks of trees, especially old or dead trees that are still standing or logs on the ground that are dead. A lot of times you will find shelf fungi, little things that look like shelves. Basically just looking closely, getting down on the ground, taking your time. Next question, how long on average does it take for something to decompose? That's a really good question, and it's something that a lot of people have done scientific experiments. Scientists have been studying that for many years. And there's not really a clear answer. It really, really depends on a lot of different things. One is what kind of climate you're in and what kind of weather is happening. So areas that are wetter and warm usually will have quicker decomposition because the fungus really grows quickly in those kinds of environments. It also really depends on what's being decomposed. So if you're talking about human-made materials, metals, glass, plastics, things like that, those can take years or even centuries. I looked it up online, and the estimate for how long an aluminum can will take to decompose can be anywhere from 200 to 500 years. And glass, scientists predict that glass could take 1,000,000 years to decompose. Amazing. And then, of course, there's a lot of things that are pretty quick, like, soft foods, fruits, things like that. If you have bread, obviously that can get mold pretty quickly. Bones, if you're thinking of animal parts, dead animals, the flesh and the fat and the tissues of the animal can decompose pretty quickly, and a lot of times scavengers will come along and eat and pick at them too. But the bones can take a long time, especially in dry climates like here in New Mexico. It can take years. You could see a bone just sitting out there, and I actually have a little piece of bone that we found at the Sandia Mountain Natural History Center that has a lot of little holes happening in it. So over time in the sun or as it dries out, it'll start to get those little holes and areas that start to decompose. So bone does decompose. It can just take a very, very long time. Next question is about lichen. So if you're not familiar with what lichen is, I showed this to the class. This is a branchy lichen growing on a branch, haha. So lichen is actually fungus. So what you're seeing here is the fungus, and then inside of that lives little cells of algae that we can't see, but they live in the fungus because algae normally needs a lot of water, like aquatic ecosystems like ponds or rivers or oceans. But again, here in this area, it's dry. So a lot of algae will grow inside of the fungus and form this symbiotic relationship, it's called, where the fungus gives a home for the algae, and also it'll soak in water. And then the water will allow the algae to do photosynthesis, and then the algae will give food for itself. It'll make its own food using that photosynthesis, and it'll make food for the fungus. So one student asked, how do you find lichen? Well, you can find it in a lot of places in the mountains. So I work in the Sandia Mountains, and there's lichen all around up there. So you don't have to try too hard to find it. You just have to know what you're looking for. So when you're out walking through the woods, you'll see a lot of lichen on the branches like I just showed you. You'll see some old man's beard, fuzzy lichen hanging down, especially if you go high in elevation on the mountain, you'll see more and more of that hanging from the trees. There's also a lot of lichen that grows on the rocks. So a lot of sandstone especially will get big patches of lime green lichen or gray lichen, brown lichen, all different colors. It is not easy to find lichen in Rio Rancho or Albuquerque. It really needs good air quality, and so it's kind of an indicator species of good air quality. Next lichen question. I'm still curious about lichen and why it grows on trees. Well, just like any other living thing, it's good habitat for it. So lichen doesn't have roots like a normal like most producers' plants that you would think of. So instead, it just grows a little bit. The base of it grows into the wood. So it's hard to see on here. I can't really see where it's exactly growing into the wood here. But it is attached to this wood very firmly. I can jiggle it, and I wouldn't want to try to pull it off because that's where it needs to live. It needs to be attached somewhere. And then when it's living on a branch or a trunk of a tree or a rock, then it's in a nice spot, usually to get sunlight and to get water when it rains or snow melts. So it wants it kind of being out in the open where it can get the resources that it needs. So it will stay attached to those things.